I'm Rachel Harper, 32 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I knew what family meant. That night at my parents' Connecticut mansion started like our usual tense dinners. Mom critiquing my outfit, Dad praising my sister Heather's medical career. Then Heather announced her pregnancy and champagne flowed. When everyone settled, Dad looked at me and said those words, "You're not half the woman your sister is." I pushed my chair back and stood up. That night changed everything. Not just for me, but for everyone who thought they knew our family's perfect little story. Before I dive into this journey, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and let's explore together how sometimes pushing back your chair is the first step toward finding your voice. The evening had started with such promise. I'd driven 2 hours to my parents' estate in Greenwich, clutching a bottle of wine that cost half my grocery budget. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time they'd see me, really see me, for who I was rather than who they wanted me to be. The sprawling McMansion looked like something from a luxury real estate magazine, all gleaming windows and perfect landscaping. So different from my cozy but cramped one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, where I'd been struggling to build my graphic design business. I parked my 10-year-old Honda between Dad's Mercedes and Heather's Range Rover, already feeling the familiar inadequacy creeping in. "Rachel, you made it," Mom said when she opened the door, air kissing near my cheek. She stepped back, eyes scanning me from head to toe. "That shirt is interesting. Wouldn't a dress have been more appropriate for a family dinner?" I swallowed the retort that formed instantly on my tongue. "It's good to see you too, Mom." Dad was in his usual spot, nursing a scotch in his leather armchair. "There's our girl," he said, not bothering to get up. "How's the drawing business going?" "It's graphic design, Dad, and it's going well. I just finished a campaign for a sustainable clothing brand that's getting great engagement." He nodded vaguely clearly, not listening. "That's nice, sweetheart. Did you hear about your sister's new research grant? $2 million. $2 million. And she's being considered for department head. At 34, and so it began the familiar ritual of Heather's greatness. By the time we sat down for dinner, I'd heard about her perfect husband Jeffrey's promotion, their vacation home purchase, and how she somehow managed her demanding career while maintaining her fitness routine and charity work. Then came the announcement. "Mom, Dad, Heather," said, reaching for Jeffrey's hand with practiced precision. "We wanted you both to know. We're expecting." The reaction was explosive. Mom burst into tears of joy. Dad jumped up to embrace them both. Crystal flutes appeared and expensive champagne flowed freely. "A toast," Dad declared once everyone had settled. "To Heather and Jeffrey, continuing the Harper legacy with what will undoubtedly be the perfect grandchild." I raised my glass mechanically, the familiar knot in my stomach tightening. I should be happy for my sister. I wanted to be. But sitting there watching my parents beam with a pride they'd never shown for anything I'd accomplished was suffocating. So Rachel, Mom turned to me after the excitement had somewhat settled. "Any prospects on your horizon, men better job. You're not getting any younger." I cleared my throat. "Actually, I just landed a major client that could really put my business on the map." "That's nice, dear," Mom said dismissively. "But I worry about your future. Your biological clock won't wait for your little drawing hobby to become profitable." "It's a business, not a hobby," I said, feeling the familiar heat rise to my cheeks. "I'm doing well. I'm happy." "Happy doesn't pay for the lifestyle you were raised to have," Dad interjected. "Look at what your sister has built. A respected career, a beautiful home, a solid marriage, and now a family. That's success." "We all have different definitions of success," I said quietly. Dad scoffed, swirling his scotch. "Don't kid yourself, Rachel. Success is measurable, concrete. Your sister has everything figured out. Always has. You've always been." He paused, looking for the words, searching. The table fell silent. I could feel Heather's eyes on me, that mixture of pity and smugness she'd perfected over years. "What your father means," Mom jumped in with her practiced peacemaker tone, "is that we worry about you. You've always been so creative." Impractical. Impractical, I repeated. Because I chose to follow my passion instead of the life you mapped out for me. Dad set down his glass with a decisive clink. Let's be honest here. You're 32 with a failing business, renting an apartment, and no prospects. Your sister was published in medical journals at 28. She saves lives daily. She's building a family. You're not half the woman your sister is. The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. I pushed my chair back and stood up. Everyone froze. This wasn't part of our family script. For years, I'd absorbed these comparisons, these subtle and not so subtle digs, with a smile and self-deprecating joke. Not tonight. Do you know what's funny? My voice was surprisingly steady. I came here tonight actually believing things might be different. That after 32 years, you might see me as my own person, not just Heather's disappointing shadow. Rachel, don't be dramatic, Mom started. I held up my hand. No, I'm done being silenced. For years, I've watched you celebrate every single one of Heather's achievements while dismissing mine. I've endured the comparisons, the criticisms disguised as concern, the constant reminders that I don't measure up to your expectations. We just want what's best for you, Dad said stiffly. No, you want me to be what's best for you. There's a difference. I looked at each of them. Mom's shocked expression, Dad's reddening face, Heather's wide eyes. I'm done trying to earn love that should be unconditional. I'm done apologizing for being exactly who I am. I picked up my purse. Congratulations on the baby, Heather. I truly hope your child never has to feel the way you and our parents have made me feel my entire life. The silence as I walked to the door was deafening. I could feel them staring, waiting for me to break, to apologize as I always did, to fall back into my assigned role. Instead, I walked out, closed the door behind me, and got into my car. The tears didn't start until I was halfway home, but they weren't tears of regret. Something had broken free inside me that night. Something that had been caged for far too long. The memories flooded back as I drove home from Greenwich that night. Headlights cutting through the darkness, windshield wipers battling the spring rain that had started to fall. It wasn't just about tonight's dinner. It was about a lifetime of never being enough. I was 7 when I first noticed the difference in how my parents treated us. Heather, 9 at the time, had been selected for an elite ballet program. My parents spared no expense. Custom-made leotards, private lessons with former principal dancers, weekend trips to New York City to see professional performances. Meanwhile, when I showed interest in art classes, Mom picked up some colored pencils from the dollar store and told me to practice at home first to see if I was really serious about it. In middle school, Heather's science fair projects were elaborate affairs with Dad staying up late to help her construct complex displays. My creative writing award certificate was magneted to the refrigerator for exactly 3 days before being replaced by Heather's perfect report card. High school crystallized the pattern. Heather was class president, valedictorian, prom queen. The perfect daughter who checked every box on my parents' list of acceptable achievements. I found my place in the art studio and the school newspaper, developing my eye for design and narrative. When my artwork was selected for a citywide exhibition, Dad asked if that would help with college applications at least. When I was accepted to Parsons School of Design with a partial scholarship, Mom sighed and said, I suppose that's better than nothing. The contrast was never more painful than at my college graduation. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, graduating with honors, my final portfolio, receiving recognition from industry professionals. My parents arrived late, having attended a social event at the country club that morning, something to do with Heather's medical school community. They sat impatiently through the ceremony, then rushed me through celebratory photos so they wouldn't miss their dinner reservation. This is quite nice, Mom had said, flipping through my portfolio with the enthusiasm of someone examining a tax form. But is it really practical, dear? Your sister's already been accepted to her residency program at Johns Hopkins. After graduation, the pattern continued. Every achievement in my growing design career was met with lukewarm acknowledgement, always followed by updates on Heather's latest medical triumph. When I won a regional advertising award for a campaign I'd designed, Dad's response was, "That's nice, sweetheart. Did you hear your sister's research is being considered for publication?" The previous month had been particularly difficult. The boutique design agency where I'd been working closed, suddenly leaving me scrambling for freelance work to cover my bills. The same week, my boyfriend of 2 years ended our relationship, citing my family issues as one of the reasons he couldn't see a future with me. "You're always so tense after seeing them," he'd said. "It's like you become a different person." My apartment had become my sanctuary, the one place where I didn't have to measure up to impossible standards. I decorated it with found objects and original artwork from friends, creating a space that reflected who I truly was, rather than who my parents wanted me to be. After the disastrous dinner, I curled up on my second-hand sofa wrapped in my grandmother's quilt and allowed myself to feel everything I'd been suppressing for years. Morning brought the inevitable aftermath. My phone showed 7 missed calls, 3 from Mom, 2 from Dad, 2 from Heather, and a series of text messages that followed the predictable pattern. "Mom, I don't understand why you had to make such a scene. Your father is very upset. Dad, your behavior last night was completely unacceptable. You owe your sister an apology. Heather, you really know how to make everything about you, don't you? Even my pregnancy announcement wasn't safe from your drama." The last message was from Mom again. "We've always supported you, Rachel. I don't know where this ingratitude comes from." I set my phone down without responding. That was the problem. They genuinely didn't see it. In their minds, they had been perfectly loving parents who had simply acknowledged the obvious differences between their daughters. The fact that those acknowledgments had systematically dismantled my self-worth over decades wasn't even on their radar. For the first time in my life, I didn't immediately scramble to smooth things over. I didn't craft a careful apology designed to placate without addressing the real issues. I didn't downplay my feelings to maintain family harmony. Instead, I made coffee, sat by my window overlooking the Brooklyn street below, and made a decision that was long overdue. I was done being the family scapegoat, done accepting scraps of affection and calling it love, done measuring my worth against my sister's achievements. It was time to stand up for myself, even if I had to do it alone. 3 days after the dinner, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was my cousin, Brittany. "Rachel, thank God you picked up. I tried your cell, but it went straight to voicemail." "I've been screening calls," I admitted. "What's up, Britt?" "I thought you should know. Aunt Margaret has been calling everyone. She's telling people you had some kind of breakdown at dinner, that you're jealous of Heather's pregnancy and lashed out at everyone." My stomach dropped. Aunt Margaret was my mother's sister and the family gossip headquarters. What she said became family gospel. "That's not what happened," I said, my voice tight. "I figured," Brittany replied. "Look, I know your mom and Heather can be, a lot. Just wanted to give you a heads up that they're spinning this pretty hard. Uncle Richard called my dad saying they're concerned about your mental health." After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence. I should have expected this. The family system couldn't allow for the possibility that my parents had done anything wrong. It was easier to label me unstable than to examine decades of dysfunctional family dynamics. The smear campaign escalated quickly. By the end of the week, I'd received concerned messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. My second cousin's wife, a woman I'd met exactly twice, sent a link to a therapist who specializes in sibling jealousy. The betrayal hurt, but what came next was worse. My best friend Amanda arrived at my apartment Friday evening with a bottle of wine and takeout. "I figured you could use this," she said, giving me a fierce hug. As we settled on my sofa, I filled her in on the family fallout. I knew they'd be upset, but I never expected them to portray me as mentally unstable. Amanda took a long sip of wine. "Are you really surprised? They can't admit they've treated you unfairly. That would mean acknowledging they're not perfect parents." I guess I sighed. But using Heather's pregnancy as ammunition, saying I'm jealous, that's low even for them. Amanda set down her glass. "About Heather. There's something I've never told you. I thought it would just hurt you and wouldn't change anything. The serious tone in her voice made me pause. What is it? Remember that guy you dated sophomore year of college, Ryan Matthews? I nodded. Ryan had been my first serious boyfriend. We dated for 8 months before he suddenly broke things off, saying he needed space. I'd been devastated. 2 weeks after you two broke up, I saw him with Heather at that coffee shop near campus. They were. It was obvious they were together. The room seemed to tilt. What are you saying? Heather pursued him, Rachel. She knew you were dating. She did it anyway. That's impossible, I whispered. She was at Johns Hopkins. She was dating that surgical resident. She was home that weekend for some medical conference. Ryan told his roommate that she'd been texting him for weeks. Said she made it clear she was interested. Amanda reached for my hand. I'm so sorry. I should have told you then. This revelation opened a floodgate. I suddenly remembered other coincidences through the years. How Heather had somehow ended up with the internship I'd mentioned, applying for how she'd bought the exact car I'd been saving for right after I told her about it. How she'd vacationed at the small Italian village I'd discovered and raved about to my family. The next morning, my phone dinged with a LinkedIn notification. A former client had messaged me, just heard you're taking a break from design work to deal with personal issues. Hope everything's okay. Let me know when you're back in business. I frowned, immediately calling him. Darren, what are you talking about? I'm not taking a break. Oh, he sounded confused. Your father called our mutual connection at the Chamber of Commerce. Said you were stepping back from work commitments to focus on your health. He seemed concerned. Cold fury washed over me. My father was actively sabotaging my business contacts. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from him. Your behavior has consequences, Rachel. When you're ready to apologize and act like a proper daughter, we can discuss how to move forward. That evening, my social media accounts were flooded with messages from family, friends, and distant relatives, all expressing concern about my breakdown and offering prayers for my recovery. I was sitting in stunned silence, staring at my phone when it rang again. This time it was my Aunt Sophia, my father's sister and the family rebel who had moved to Seattle 20 years ago, maintaining only minimal contact with the family. Rachel, it's Aunt Sophia. Your cousin Brittany told me what's happening. They're making me sound crazy, Aunt Sophia, I said, my voice breaking. All because I finally stood up for myself. I know exactly what they're doing, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Your father did the same to me when I refused to follow the family career path. Listen to me, Rachel. You are not crazy. What they're doing, the smear campaign, the manipulation, the gaslighting, that's the crazy part. Her understanding brought tears to my eyes. I don't know what to do. They're contacting my clients. Document everything she advised. Every call, every text, every social media post. And Rachel, don't engage. That's what they want. To pull you back into their drama so they can prove you're unstable. The best response is your success and happiness. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. Instead of responding to the barrage of messages, I began researching family dynamics and emotional abuse. The term scapegoat kept appearing. The family member who becomes the repository for all problems, the one who carries the emotional baggage the others refuse to acknowledge. The more I read, the clearer the pattern became. I wasn't imagining the differential treatment. I wasn't overly sensitive. What I had experienced was a recognized form of family dysfunction, and my reaction at dinner wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. For the first time in my life, I saw my family with clarity instead of through the fog of desperate hope for their approval. And I knew I couldn't go back to being their scapegoat. Not ever again. 2 weeks after the dinner incident, I received a handwritten note from my grandmother, Catherine, my father's mother, who lived in a seniors community about an hour outside the city. Please visit if you can, she'd written. There are things you should know. Grandma Catherine had always been kind to me, though somewhat distant, a product of her generation's reserve. She'd never shown obvious favoritism between Heather and me, but she'd never intervened in my parents' treatment of me either. I drove out to see her the following Saturday, curious about what she wanted to share. Her apartment was meticulously kept filled with antiques and family photos. She welcomed me with a brief hug and ushered me to her small dining table where tea was already set out. "You've caused quite a stir in the family," she said, after pouring tea into delicate porcelain cups. "I didn't mean to," I replied automatically, then caught myself. "Actually, maybe I did. Something needed to change." She nodded slowly. "Your grandfather would have liked your spirit. He never approved of how Richard treated you." I blinked in surprise. "Grandpa knew." "Of course he knew. We both did." She set down her cup with a decisive click. "Your father has always had. Let's call them blind spots, particularly when it comes to acknowledging his own flaws." She rose and went to a cabinet, returning with a leather portfolio. "Before I show you these, you should know that I've wrestled with this decision. Family loyalty is important to me, but so is truth." Inside the portfolio were documents. Old business papers, letters, bank statements. Grandma Catherine spread them out carefully. "Your father's company wasn't built solely on his brilliant ideas, as he likes to claim," she said. "His first major success, the one that launched the business, was based on concepts developed by his partner, Thomas Winters." She showed me letters documenting the original partnership agreement and subsequent amendments that gradually squeezed Thomas out of the company's profits while keeping his innovations. "Thomas was brilliant but naive about business," she explained. "Richard exploited that. When Thomas finally realized what was happening and threatened legal action, your father had already secured ironclad contracts and powerful connections." I stared at the evidence of my father's ruthlessness, feeling sick. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you need to understand who you're dealing with," she said simply. "This is how Richard operates. He rewrites reality to suit his narrative. He's done it in business, and he's done it with his family." She pulled out more documents, financial records showing large gifts to Heather over the years. The down payment for her house, which my parents had claimed was entirely her own achievement. Expensive vacations disguised as business trips. Substantial investments in her name. "I have nothing against your sister," Grandma Catherine said, "but the disparate treatment has been deliberate and calculated. When you expressed interest in art school, your father told the family he wouldn't waste money on an impractical degree. Meanwhile, he was paying for Heather's entire education plus extras." She pulled out a folder with correspondence between my father and various family members over the years. In these emails and letters, he consistently portrayed me as struggling, difficult, and aimless, creating a narrative that primed the family to view my accomplishments as surprises and my challenges as predictable failures. "Your mother is no innocent bystander," Grandma Catherine continued. "Her prescription dependency started years ago, anxiety medication that gradually became something more. She functions well enough, but she's chosen the path of least resistance, supporting Richard's version of reality rather than facing difficult truths." I sat back, overwhelmed. "And Heather, has she known about all this?" Grandma Catherine's expression softened slightly. "Heather has been both beneficiary and victim of your parents' dysfunction. They elevated her, yes, but at a cost. She's trapped in a role of perpetual perfection. The recent malpractice incident at the hospital was nearly career-ending." "What malpractice incident?" "This was the first I'd heard of any professional trouble. It was covered up with your father's connections and money. A surgical error that could have had serious consequences. The patient was quietly compensated, records adjusted." She sighed. "Heather isn't a bad doctor, but she's not the infallible genius they've made her out to be either. The pressure on her is immense." My mind was reeling. "Why tell me all this now? You've known for years." She reached across the table and took my hand, a rare gesture of affection. "Because you're the first one who stood up to them. Your grandfather made me promise before he died that if any of his descendants broke free from Richard's control, I would make sure they had the truth." She squeezed my hand. "He was very fond of you, Rachel. Said you had his mother's artist's eye." As I gathered my things to leave, Grandma Catherine handed me one final document, a copy of her will. I've made some changes recently. You and Heather will share equally in what I leave behind. Richard won't be able to interfere with your portion. Driving home, I felt an odd mixture of vindication and grief. The family I thought I knew had never really existed. The validation of my experiences brought relief, but the revelations about my parents' true nature opened a new wound. They hadn't just favored Heather. They had actively worked to diminish me while maintaining their perfect family facade. For years, I'd blamed myself. If only I were more accomplished, more conventional, more like Heather, then perhaps I would be worthy of their love. Now I understood that it had never been about my worth. It had been about maintaining a family system that required a scapegoat to function, and I had been assigned that role before I was old enough to recognize what was happening. But knowing the truth gave me power. The fog of self-doubt that had surrounded me for decades was lifting. I could see clearly now. Not just my parents' manipulation, but my own strength in surviving it. I was no longer fighting for their approval. I was fighting for my freedom. The knock on my apartment door came just as I was finishing my evening coffee. 3 weeks had passed since my visit with Grandma Catherine, and I'd been channeling my emotional turmoil into rebuilding my business. I hadn't responded to any of my family's messages, maintaining the boundary Aunt Sophia had advised. I peered through the peephole and froze. Heather stood in the hallway, shifting nervously from foot to foot. My first instinct was to pretend I wasn't home, but curiosity won out. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. "What are you doing here?" Heather's perfectly highlighted hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and her designer outfit looked uncharacteristically rumpled. Most surprising were her eyes, red-rimmed and puffy. "Can I please come in, Rachel, just for a few minutes?" Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. Heather surveyed my apartment with none of her usual barely concealed judgment. Instead, she seemed distracted, almost vulnerable. "I like what you've done with the place," she said, gesturing to the gallery wall I'd created with prints from local artists. "It's very you." "Thanks," I replied cautiously. "Why are you here, Heather?" She sank onto my sofa, suddenly looking exhausted. "Everything's falling apart. Dad's furious that you've cut contact. Mom's anxiety is through the roof. The family is taking sides. And I'm just..." She pressed a hand to her slightly rounded belly. "I'm so tired of it all." I remained standing, arms crossed. "So you came to convince me to apologize and fall back in line. Make things easier for everyone by resuming my role as family punching bag." "No," she said, looking up with unexpected directness. "I came because you're the only one who might understand how suffocating they can be." I stared at her, suspicious but intrigued. "You think it's easy being the favorite," she continued. "The golden child. Do you have any idea what it's like knowing your entire worth is based on achievement? One mistake, one failure, and it all comes crashing down." "At least they celebrate your achievements," I countered. "Mine barely register." "I know," she admitted quietly. "I've always known it wasn't fair. But it was easier to go along with it than to challenge them." She told me about the pressure, the constant expectation of perfection, the panic attacks before exams, the fear that one misstep would collapse the carefully constructed identity our parents had built for her. "The pregnancy wasn't planned," she confessed. "I was going to wait until after making department head. But now they're treating it like another achievement. The perfect Harper grandchild. Mom's already talking about elite preschools." For the first time in our adult lives, we had a real conversation about our childhoods from our different perspectives, about the roles we'd been assigned in the family drama, about the toll it had taken on both of us. "I'm sorry about Ryan," she said suddenly, not meeting my eyes. I stiffened. "You knew. I knew about that." "Not until recently. Jeffrey and I had a fight, and I mentioned it. Mom let slip that you'd found out." She twisted her wedding ring. "I was jealous of you back then. You seemed so free, so authentic. Ryan was attracted to that in you and I. I wanted to prove I could take that from you if I wanted." The admission hung in the air between us. "That was cruel, Heather." "I know." She looked genuinely remorseful. I've done a lot of things I'm not proud of where you're concerned. Competition was the only relationship model we were given. As the evening progressed, it felt like walls were coming down. Heather admitted she'd always been jealous of my creativity and courage. I confessed I'd envied her confidence and clarity of purpose. We laughed about some of the absurd family dynamics we'd normalized, cried about the ways we'd been pitted against each other. When she left around midnight, we hugged. A real embrace, not the stiff, obligatory kind we'd exchanged at family functions. I'm trying to figure out how to be a better person before this baby comes, she said at the door. I don't want to perpetuate the cycle. That's a good first step, I told her, feeling hopeful for the first time in years about our relationship. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of notifications on my phone. A sick feeling grew in my stomach as I scrolled through messages from friends and colleagues, asking if I was okay if the things going around were true. With shaking hands, I opened my email to find a message from my largest client. Rachel, we've received concerning information about your personal situation that may impact your ability to fulfill our contract. We need to discuss this urgently. Attached was an audio file. When I played it, I heard my own voice from the previous night. I've been having these episodes where I just lose it. The medication helps sometimes, but I can't be trusted to meet deadlines when I'm like this. My business is basically a house of cards right now. I stared at my phone in horror. Those weren't my words. They were fragments of our conversation edited and rearranged to create a completely false narrative. Heather had recorded our conversation and manipulated it. My phone rang. My boss at the part-time design position I'd taken to stabilize my income after losing clients to my father's interference. Rachel, we need to talk about your position here. We've received some concerning information about your reliability. As the implications sank in, my phone buzzed with a text from Heather. I'm sorry it came to this. I tried to help you, but you're determined to destroy our family. Dad says this is the only way you'll learn there are consequences to your actions. If you apologize and get help, everything can go back to normal. I sat on my bed feeling a strange calm descend. This betrayal was so complete, so calculating that it left no room for doubt. The sister who had cried on my sofa last night, who had shared vulnerabilities and apologized for past wrongs, had been executing a plan all along. They had escalated from family gossip to actively destroying my professional reputation. This wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. This was an orchestrated attempt to break me completely. But instead of breaking, something hardened inside me. This final betrayal burned away any remaining illusions about reconciliation or understanding. They had shown me exactly who they were and what they were willing to do. Now I would show them who I had become. The aftermath of Heather's betrayal was swift and brutal. Within days, I'd lost my part-time position at the design firm, and 2 major clients had paused our contracts pending resolution of personal issues. My carefully built professional reputation was unraveling before my eyes. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by bills I wasn't sure how I could pay. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and my savings were dwindling after the previous months of family interference had already cost me work. My phone rang, an unknown number. "Is this Rachel Harper?" a male voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Michael Donovan. I work at Visionary Design Group. We have a mutual connection. Jessica Winters." Jessica was a friend from college who worked at a prestigious advertising agency. I hadn't spoken to her in months. "Jessica mentioned you might be available for some contract work. We've got a campaign that needs a fresh perspective. Any interest in talking about it?" It felt like the first good news in weeks. "Absolutely. When would you like to meet?" "How about coffee tomorrow? I can show you the brief." After we arranged the details, I immediately called Jessica. "Thank you for the referral," I said when she answered. "I really need the work right now." "What's going on, Rachel?" Jessica asked, concern evident in her voice. "I've been hearing strange rumors about you having some kind of breakdown." I hesitated, then decided to be honest. My family is spreading those rumors because I finally stood up to their emotional abuse. They're actively trying to sabotage my career. There was a pause on the line. That's intense. Are you okay? I'm getting there, I said. But they've contacted my client's edited recordings of private conversations to make me sound unstable and basically launched a full-scale campaign to destroy my professional credibility. That's not just emotionally abusive, Rachel. That might be illegal. Jessica's tone had shifted from concern to outrage. Have you talked to a lawyer? I can't afford one right now. I have a friend who specializes in defamation cases. Let me connect you. Initial consultations are usually free. By the end of the day, I had an appointment with Jessica's lawyer friend and a coffee meeting set up with Michael from Visionary Design. The meeting with Michael went surprisingly well. He was straightforward and professional, laying out a campaign for an eco-friendly clothing brand that aligned perfectly with my design sensibilities. I've seen your portfolio online, he said. Your aesthetic is exactly what we're looking for. My portfolio, I frowned. I took my website down last week after it was hacked. Another coincidence I suspected was related to my family's efforts. Michael pulled out his tablet and showed me a sleek website showcasing my best work, along with client testimonials and case studies. Jessica put this together, he explained. Said you might need some professional backup while you dealt with family issues. She was deliberately vague, but implied you could use some support. Tears pricked at my eyes. I hadn't realized Jessica had been paying such close attention to my career, let alone that she would go to such lengths to help me. The meeting with the lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Lisa Mitchell, was equally productive. Based on what you've described, you have a potential case for defamation, intentional interference with business relationships, and possibly harassment, she said after listening to my story and reviewing the evidence I gathered. The edited recording is particularly troubling. That crosses several legal lines. What should I do? I asked. Document everything she advised, echoing Aunt Sophia. Every call, text, email, any financial losses directly attributable to their actions, any witnesses to their behavior. She handed me her card. I can't promise we'll go to court. Family cases are messy and expensive, but we can certainly prepare a cease and desist letter that might get their attention. Later that week, an unexpected email arrived in my inbox from an address I didn't recognize, twinters@wintersinnovations.com. Miss Harper, my name is Thomas Winters. I was your father's business partner many years ago. I understand from mutual connections that you've been experiencing some difficulties with Richard. I have information that might be relevant to your situation. Would you be willing to meet? Thomas Winters, the partner my grandmother had mentioned, the one whose ideas my father had stolen to launch his business empire. My hands shook slightly as I replied to schedule a meeting. We met at a quiet cafe in a part of town unlikely to be frequented by any of my parents' social circle. Thomas Winters was in his 70s now, with sharp eyes and a dignified bearing that reminded me somewhat of my grandfather. I've kept tabs on Richard over the years, he said after we exchanged introductions. Not out of vindictiveness, but as a matter of self-preservation. Your father is not someone who likes loose ends. He explained how my father had systematically pushed him out of their partnership, claiming credit for Thomas's innovations, while using legal maneuvering to deny him fair compensation. I was naive, he admitted. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. Richard had secured patents under the company name, created contracts that minimized my contribution, and cultivated relationships with investors who saw him as the creative force. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I recognize the pattern, he said simply. When your grandmother contacted me and explained your situation, I saw Richard using the same playbook he used against me. Discredit, isolate, then eliminate the threat. He slid a folder across the table. These are copies of original documents, emails, and memos that demonstrate your father's methods. There's also evidence of some questionable financial practices that I suspect continue to this day. I stared at the folder. Are you suggesting I use this against my father? Thomas shook his head. I'm suggesting you understand what you're up against and have protection if needed. Knowledge is power, Miss Harper. Your father knows that better than most. That evening, I laid out everything I had gathered. Grandma Catherine's documents, Thomas's folder, the evidence of my family's smear campaign, the edited recording Heather had created. Spread across my living room floor, it painted a damning picture of manipulation, deception, and calculated cruelty spanning decades. My first instinct had been to use this information for revenge, to expose my family's carefully constructed facade and watch it crumble. But as I organized the evidence, I realized that wasn't the path to freedom. This wasn't about destroying them. It was about protecting myself. I spent the weekend creating a comprehensive portfolio website showcasing my work complete with verifiable client testimonials and case studies that demonstrated my professional reliability and creative talents. Michael from Visionary Design agreed to be a reference, and the project he'd brought me was going well. I wrote detailed accounts of each instance of interference with my business relationships backed by emails, phone records, and witness statements from colleagues willing to confirm what they'd been told by my family members. By Monday morning, I had constructed a professional and personal defense strategy that didn't depend on my family's approval or connection. I was rebuilding on my own terms, creating a foundation they couldn't easily undermine. I wasn't just fighting back against their sabotage. I was creating something stronger than what they had tried to destroy. 3 weeks later, an embossed invitation arrived in my mail. The annual Harper family Easter gathering at my parents' estate. In previous years, I'd approached these events with a mixture of dread and desperate hope. This year, the invitation felt different. Not an obligation, but an opportunity. I called Aunt Sophia. "They've invited me to Easter," I said when she answered. "Of course they have," she replied. "They need to show the family that everything's fine. Your absence would raise too many questions. I'm thinking of going." There was a pause. "Are you sure that's wise? They'll be on their home turf, surrounded by allies." "That's what I'm counting on," I said. The perfect audience for the truth. We discussed strategy. How to prepare, what to expect, how to maintain boundaries in a pressure cooker environment designed to push me back into my assigned role. "Bring someone with you," Aunt Sophia advised. "Someone who wasn't raised in that system and can see clearly when they try to manipulate you." I asked Michael, who had become both a professional colleague and a friend over the past weeks. "Fair warning, it's going to be intense." "All the more reason you shouldn't go alone," he said, without hesitation. The morning of the gathering, I dressed with deliberate care, a sophisticated emerald dress that highlighted my confidence rather than the muted tones I'd habitually worn to family functions to avoid drawing attention. I styled my hair differently, applied makeup that accentuated rather than downplayed my features. The physical transformation was subtle but significant. I was no longer trying to make myself smaller, less noticeable. I was done diminishing myself to make others comfortable. Michael whistled appreciatively when he picked me up. "You look amazing." "Ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be." The drive to Greenwich was familiar but felt different now. I wasn't approaching as a supplicant hoping for crumbs of approval. I was arriving as an equal, armed with truth and boundaries. My mother answered the door, her practiced smile faltering slightly at the sight of Michael. "Rachel, darling, we weren't expecting you to bring a guest." "Mom, this is Michael Donovan, my colleague and friend." "Michael, this is my mother, Margaret Harper." Mom's smile tightened as she shook his hand. "How lovely. Do come in. Everyone's in the garden." The backyard was filled with extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family, friends, all mingling with champagne flutes and practiced small talk. I felt their eyes on me as we entered, the whispers barely concealed behind hands and glasses. Dad approached immediately, all smiles and hearty handshakes for public consumption. "Rachel, good to see you've decided to join us." He extended his hand to Michael. "Richard Harper, welcome to our home." "Michael Donovan, thank you for having me." Dad's grip on Michael's hand tightened imperceptibly. "And how do you know my daughter?" "We work together at Visionary Design," Michael replied smoothly. "Rachel's talent has been instrumental in our current campaign." Dad's smile didn't reach his eyes. Isn't that nice? Rachel, your mother needs help in the kitchen. Why don't you? I'm sure Mom has everything under control, I interrupted. I'd like to say hello to everyone first. I moved through the gathering, greeting relatives and family friends with a confidence that clearly unsettled them. They were used to the apologetic, self-effacing Rachel who could be easily dismissed. This version of me, poised, articulate, unapologetic, didn't fit the narrative they'd been fed. Heather and Jeffrey arrived fashionably late, her baby bump now more pronounced. She froze momentarily when she saw me, then quickly recovered, plastering on her social smile. "Rachel, what a surprise," she said, air kissing near my cheek. Her whisper was barely audible. "What are you doing here?" "Exactly what you did at my apartment," I replied quietly. "Showing up where I'm expected." She paled slightly, then turned to Michael with exaggerated warmth. "And who's this?" Before the stilted introductions could continue, Mom appeared at my elbow. "Rachel, could I see you in the kitchen for a moment? I need your help with something." I recognized the tactic. Isolate me from witnesses, apply pressure in private, then expect me to maintain the facade in public. "Anything you need to discuss can be said here, Mom," I replied calmly. Her smile tightened further. "It's a family matter, dear." "We're surrounded by family," I pointed out. "Or is it something you don't want them to hear?" A flash of anger crossed her face before she regained control. "Don't be difficult, Rachel. Not today." Dad appeared at Mom's side, a united front. "Your mother asked you to help in the kitchen," he said, his voice low but carrying the unmistakable command that had always made me fall in line. "Not today. Actually, I think it's time we all had an honest conversation," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I've spent my entire life trying to earn love that should have been unconditional, measuring myself against impossible standards, and accepting blame for family dynamics that were never my fault." The garden had gone quiet, everyone suddenly finding our family tableau the most interesting sight at the gathering. "Rachel, you're making a scene," Dad hissed. "No, I'm finally speaking the truth. There's a difference." I turned to address the wider audience. "For years, you've all heard stories about poor, unstable Rachel who just can't get her act together. What you haven't heard is how systematically my accomplishments have been dismissed while my sisters were celebrated. How my parents have actively interfered with my business relationships. How my sister recorded a private conversation, edited it to make me sound unstable, and sent it to my clients." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. "That's ridiculous," Dad blustered. "Rachel has been struggling with emotional issues. We've only tried to help." "Is that why you called my clients, telling them I was taking a break for mental health reasons?" I asked, pulling out printed emails from former clients confirming his interference. "Is that why Mom has been calling family members saying I had a breakdown when all I did was stand up for myself?" Mom stepped forward, her voice honey-sweet with concern. "Darling, these delusions are exactly why we're worried about you. Perhaps this isn't the best time to discuss your issues." "They're not delusions when I have evidence," I replied, maintaining my composure. "Would you like me to share the edited recording Heather created, or perhaps the testimonials from my colleagues about the calls they received from you and Dad questioning my stability and reliability?" Heather moved to Dad's side. "Rachel, you're embarrassing yourself. No one is out to get you. This persecution complex is concerning," says the sister who pursued my college boyfriend behind my back, then showed up at my apartment with crocodile tears before betraying my confidence to sabotage my career. Several of my cousins exchanged looks. The narrative was shifting. The perfect Harper family facade developing visible cracks. Dad switched tactics, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "That's enough, Rachel. We can discuss your inappropriate behavior privately, but if you continue with these accusations, there will be consequences." "More consequences than you already tried to impose?" I asked. "Like contacting my clients and employer, like spreading rumors about my mental health, like systematically undermining my self-worth since childhood. Those kinds of consequences." I turned to my extended family. "I'm not here to destroy the family or air dirty laundry for its own sake. I'm here because the manipulation and emotional abuse that I've experienced isn't just tough parenting or sibling rivalry. It's a toxic pattern that's hurt everyone involved, including Heather. Heather's head snapped up. Don't bring me into your victim narrative. You are a victim too, I said more gently. The golden child role isn't any healthier than the scapegoat. You're trapped by impossible expectations, terrified of making mistakes. That medical malpractice incident that Dad covered up, that was a cry for help, wasn't it? The color drained from Heather's face. Dad stepped forward, genuine alarm in his eyes. You've gone too far, he said. Where did you hear about that? It doesn't matter. What matters is that this family system destroys people. It just does it in different ways. I looked around at the stunned faces of relatives. I'm not asking you to choose sides. I'm just asking you to see the truth instead of the carefully crafted image. My Aunt Patricia, Mom's younger sister, who had always been kind to me, stepped forward. Margaret, is this true? Have you been calling people saying Rachel had a breakdown? Mom flushed. Patricia, you don't understand. Rachel has been so difficult. She called me, another voice said. My cousin Brittany stepped forward. She told me Rachel was unstable and jealous of Heather's pregnancy. More voices joined in, family members comparing notes on the stories they'd been told about me over the years, the patterns suddenly becoming clear in the light of truth. Dad attempted to regain control. This is hardly the time or place for this discussion. We can address any concerns privately. That's always the response, isn't it? I said. Keep it private. Don't make a scene. Maintain the image at all costs. But that approach has allowed this dysfunction to continue for decades. I looked at my parents and sister directly. I don't want to destroy you. I don't want revenge. I want accountability and the freedom to live my life without interference. I want the smear campaign to stop. I want professional boundaries respected. The garden had fallen completely silent. In that moment, I saw my family clearly. Not as the all-powerful authorities of my childhood, but as flawed, frightened people desperately trying to maintain control of a narrative that was slipping through their fingers. I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sadness for what could have been mixed with a quiet determination about what would be. I'll be leaving now, I said quietly. Anyone who wants to have an honest relationship with me is welcome in my life. But I won't participate in the dysfunction anymore. As Michael and I walked toward the door, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find Aunt Patricia, cousin Brittany, and several other relatives following. We'd like to hear more, Aunt Patricia said simply. When you're ready to talk? It wasn't a dramatic victory. There was no satisfying moment where my parents admitted their wrongs or my sister tearfully apologized. But as we drove away from the mansion that had been the setting for so much of my pain, I felt something shift inside me. I had spoken my truth not from a place of anger or revenge, but from a place of clarity and strength. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. The weeks following the Easter confrontation brought a flurry of reactions from various family members. Some reached out with tentative support, having seen the dynamic for themselves. Others doubled down on my parents' version of events, unwilling or unable to question the family mythology. My parents launched into damage control mode. Mom sent an enormous flower arrangement to my apartment with a card that read, "We only want what's best for you. Let's put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us." Love, Mom and Dad. No acknowledgement of their actions. No apology. Just a expectation that I would once again accommodate their version of reality. I donated the flowers to a nearby nursing home. Dad's approach was more direct. First came the legal threats. A letter from his attorney suggesting that my defamatory statements at the family gathering could result in litigation if I continued to malign the Harper family reputation. When that didn't elicit the desired response, he switched tactics. His assistant called to schedule a meeting to discuss your financial future. The implication was clear: money in exchange for silence and compliance. I declined both the threats and the bribe. Meanwhile, my professional life was slowly recovering. The contract with Visionary Design had expanded to include additional projects. Michael had introduced me to his network, resulting in new clients who knew nothing about my family drama. My website was generating inquiries from businesses attracted to my design, aesthetic, and approach. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe, like the constant weight of family expectations and manipulations had lifted enough for me to stand straight and see the horizon. Then came the call from Heather. Rachel. Her voice was thick with tears. I need your help. What's wrong? Despite everything, concern for my sister was ingrained in me. Mom and Dad, they've cut me off. After Easter, when people started asking questions about what you said, the medical incident, Dad said I didn't handle it properly. That I should have denied everything more forcefully. Her breath hitched. They've frozen my accounts. They're threatening to tell Jeffrey's family about things from my past. What do you need from me? I asked cautiously. Could I stay with you just for a few days until we figure things out? Jeffrey's at a medical conference in Boston, and I don't want to be alone right now. Every instinct warned me this was a bad idea, but the part of me that had always wanted a real relationship with my sister overrode those warnings. Okay, I said. But Heather, this has to be different from last time. No recordings, no betrayals. I promise, she said, sounding genuinely relieved. This has been a wake-up call, Rachel. I'm seeing Mom and Dad clearly for the first time. She arrived that evening with a small suitcase, looking genuinely distressed. Her pregnancy was more advanced now. She was starting her third trimester, her usual sleek silhouette transformed by the rounded belly. Thank you for this, she said as I showed her to my spare room. Really just an alcove with a futon, but the best I could offer. I know I don't deserve your help after what I did. Over dinner, she shared details of the family fallout after Easter. Several relatives had confronted my parents about their treatment of me, particularly after comparing notes on the different stories they'd been told over the years. Dad had been furious, blaming Heather for not managing me better at the gathering. It's like I'm seeing everything through new eyes, she said, pushing pasta around her plate. The way they talk about you when you're not there. I always thought it was normal. Now I realize how twisted it is. It took me 32 years to see it clearly, I said. The system is designed to keep you blind to it. How did you break free? She asked, looking genuinely curious. We talked late into the night. About family dynamics, about the roles we'd been assigned, about how to build an identity separate from the expectations that had been placed on us since childhood. I'm scared about this baby, Heather admitted, her hand resting on her belly. What if I perpetuate the same patterns? What if I can't love a child who doesn't meet my expectations? The fact that you're asking those questions is a good sign, I told her. Awareness is the first step to breaking the cycle. It felt like the relationship I'd always wanted with my sister. Honest, vulnerable, supportive. For the first time, I allowed myself to hope that something good might come from all this pain. A genuine connection with Heather. A chance to be aunts to each other's future children, to create a new family narrative based on authenticity rather than appearance. I should have known better. 3 days into Heather's stay, I woke at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom and noticed a light under my office door. Thinking Heather might be having trouble sleeping, I pushed the door open quietly. She was at my desk, my laptop open, frantically searching through my files. Scattered across the desk were the folders containing the evidence I'd gathered. The documentation from Grandma Catherine, the files from Thomas Winters. My own careful records of my parents' interference with my career. What are you doing? I asked, my voice cutting through the silence. Heather startled violently, nearly falling off the chair. Rachel, I couldn't sleep and thought I might get some work done. In my private files at 3 a.m. She flushed, then her expression hardened. Fine. You want the truth Dad sent me to get back the documents you have. He said if I could retrieve everything, especially the Thomas Winters material, he'd restore my accounts and call off his threats. The betrayal shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. I should have been prepared, should have seen it coming. But I'd allowed myself to hope, and that made the pain sharper. So all of it, the tears, the vulnerability, the sisterly bonding, that was just manipulation to get access to my files. Heather's mask slipped completely, revealing a coldness I'd never seen before. You've always been so naive, Rachel. So desperate for connection that you'll believe anything. That's why you've always been easy to manipulate. And you've always been so desperate for Mom and Dad's approval that you'd betray your own sister. Multiple times. I stepped further into the room. What I don't understand is why. You're the golden child. You have everything. The career, the husband, the baby on the way, the parental adoration. Why do you need to destroy me too? Something flickered across her face. Pain, perhaps, or a moment of genuine emotion breaking through the facade. Because you're free, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You always have been, even when they were controlling every aspect of your life. You had the courage to create your own path, to follow your passion instead of their plan. Do you know how many nights I've lain awake hating my life choices, hating the golden cage I helped build? Then break free, I said. We could support each other. She laughed bitterly. It's too late for me. I'm committed. To the career I don't love, to the marriage that looks perfect on paper, but feels empty most days, to the baby I'm not sure I even want. Her hand rested on her stomach. You're my reminder of the road not taken, and I can't bear to look at it. The raw honesty of her admission stunned me into silence. So yes, she continued, I came here to get those files for Dad, because at least in my golden cage I know the rules. I know how to survive. She straightened, composing herself. I'll be leaving now. I've already called an Uber. Heather, I said as she gathered her things, it's never too late to choose differently. She paused at the door, not turning back. Maybe not for you. For me, the choice was made years ago. After she left, I sat in my darkened apartment processing this final betrayal. The pain was there but duller than before, cushioned by the clarity of finally seeing the complete picture. Heather wasn't a villain in this story any more than I was a victim. We were both products of a dysfunctional system, responding in the ways we'd been programmed to respond. The difference was that I had chosen to break the programming while she was still trapped within it. As dawn broke over the city, I made a decision that had been forming for months. It was time to completely cut ties with my toxic family. Not out of anger or revenge, but out of self-preservation and a recognition that they would never change. I would build my life on my own terms, create my own definition of success, and surround myself with people who valued authenticity over appearance, substance over status. The journey wouldn't be easy, but for the first time I was certain it was the right path. 6 months after the final betrayal, autumn had transformed Brooklyn's streets into a canvas of warm colors. My life had undergone a similar transformation, not dramatic or sudden, but a gradual shift toward something more authentic and sustainable. My design business was thriving. The visionary design contract had evolved into a part-time creative director position that allowed me to maintain my freelance clients while enjoying the stability of regular income. I'd moved to a slightly larger apartment in a neighborhood I loved, with enough space for a proper home office and room for the creative projects that fed my soul. My relationship with Michael had developed slowly and carefully. We'd both been hurt before, and were taking our time building a foundation of honest communication and mutual respect. He'd become my biggest champion professionally and personally, celebrating my successes without feeling threatened by them. More importantly, I'd built a chosen family around me, friends who understood and respected boundaries, who offered support without expectation, who valued me for exactly who I was rather than who they wanted me to be. Weekend dinners, movie nights, impromptu art projects, these had replaced the obligatory family functions that had once filled me with dread. Not everything was perfect. I still had moments of doubt, still caught myself occasionally seeking approval from ghosts of my past. Therapy had become an essential part of my healing journey, helping me recognize and rewire the patterns that had been instilled since childhood. The most unexpected development came in the form of a letter from Grandma Catherine delivered by courier rather than regular mail. Dear Rachel, I've made some adjustments to my financial arrangements. The enclosed documents transfer ownership of certain investments into your name effective immediately. These funds were originally set aside for both you and Heather, but in light of recent events, I've decided you should have access to your portion now. Your grandfather would be proud of your courage. It's not easy to stand in your truth when everyone around you is committed to denying it. With love and respect, Grandma Catherine. The enclosed documents revealed a substantial trust that would provide financial security for years to come. It wasn't about the money itself, but what it represented. Validation from someone who had witnessed the family dynamics firsthand and chosen to support my independence. I was reviewing design proofs in my office when my phone buzzed with a text from the building's security desk. Visitors for you. Richard and Margaret Harper. Allow up, my parents. After months of silence, my heart raced, the familiar anxiety rising. Then I took a deep breath, centering myself in the person I had become, rather than the child seeking approval. I'll come down, I texted back. They were waiting in the lobby. Mom perfectly coiffed as always, Dad imposing in his tailored suit. Both looked older, somehow more vulnerable than I remembered. Rachel Mom stepped forward. You look well. Thank you, I replied, maintaining a polite distance. What brings you here? We were in the city for a charity function, Dad said. Thought we might talk. We can talk here, I said, gesturing to the lobby seating area rather than inviting them up to my apartment, my sanctuary. Once seated, an uncomfortable silence fell. They exchanged glances clearly, having planned what to say. We've been doing some thinking, Dad finally began. About Easter, about the things you said. We may have been harsh at times, Mom added. Perhaps we pushed too hard. I waited, observing their careful non-apology. No acknowledgement of the smear campaign, the professional sabotage, the lifetime of emotional manipulation. Heather is due next month, Mom continued when I didn't respond. A boy. We'd like the family to be reconciled before the baby comes. The Harper name means something, Dad added. Family legacy is important. I looked at them, really looked, and saw not the intimidating figures of my childhood, but two aging people desperately clinging to their carefully constructed image. They weren't offering reconciliation. They were attempting to reassert control, to bring me back into the fold where the dysfunction could continue unchecked. I appreciate you coming, I said calmly. But reconciliation requires acknowledgement of harm and genuine change, not just a desire to maintain appearances. What exactly do you want from us, Rachel, Dad? Asked, frustration edging his tone. A public apology, Money. I don't want anything from you, I replied, the truth of it settling deep in my bones. That's the point you've never understood. I'm not rejecting you out of anger or seeking concessions. I've simply outgrown the relationship as it existed. Unless you're willing to build something new based on mutual respect and honest communication, there's nothing more to discuss. You'd cut off your own family, Mom asked incredulously. Over ancient history. The Easter confrontation was 6 months ago, Mom. The sabotage of my career was ongoing until I took legal steps to stop it. That's not ancient history. I stood up. I wish you both well. I hope you find peace. But I won't sacrifice my well-being for the sake of appearances anymore. You'll regret this, Dad said, the familiar, threatening tone emerging. When you're alone with nothing but your little drawings to keep you company, you'll wish you'd made different choices. I smiled, genuinely amused by how little they knew me after all these years. I'm not alone. I've built a life filled with people who value authenticity over image, who love unconditionally rather than transactionally. And my little drawings have built a career I'm proud of. I walked them to the door, maintaining the calm that had become my center. If you ever want a relationship based on mutual respect and boundaries, you know how to reach me. Until then, I wish you well. As they walked away, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only peace. The closure I'd sought wasn't in their acknowledgement or apology. It was in my own liberation from the need for either. That evening, I hosted a dinner party in my apartment. Michael, Jessica, and her partner colleagues, who had become friends, neighbors who had offered support during the darkest times. As I looked around at the laughter, the genuine connections, the absence of performance or pretense, I realized I had created what I'd always longed for, a circle of love based on acceptance rather than achievement. Healing wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending the abuse hadn't happened. It wasn't about perfect happiness or the absence of struggle. It was about building a life where I defined my worth, where my voice mattered, where authenticity was valued over appearance. The journey had begun 6 months ago when I pushed back my chair at that fateful dinner, refusing to accept the familiar diminishment. That small act of defiance had been the first step toward reclaiming my power, toward building a life on my own terms. As I raised my glass to toast the people who had become my chosen family, I felt gratitude wash over me. Not just for them, but for the strength I'd discovered within myself. The strength that had always been there waiting for me to claim it. What challenging family dynamics have you had to overcome in your own life? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience and growth in the comments below. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and self-discovery. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply push back your chair and stand in your truth.